So, no, I wouldn't say I have a passion for HR.
Welcome back to Human Resources for the People. It's a human capital revolution.
Today we're going to be talking about terminating in Romania. Now, this is part of a long-running series on this channel about hiring and firing across the world. Generally, I do comparative human resources labor law with a specific country and the United States. And that's the one I know best, but sometimes I know a little bit about other countries. I've been doing this for a little bit, love this stuff. And, as someone who likes to travel and explore the world, I invite you to explore with me. So, we're going to start off. This article is from Musat and Associate, and they're a Romanian employment law firm. And they first talk about whether or not there needs to be a dismissal for cause. Now, in the United States, there does not need to be a just cause, for terminations. At will is the case in 49 of 50 states. The 50th state, by the way, is Montana. People don't know that really, but it's generally speaking, there can be any cause at all. And in Romania, the reasons for dismissal are pretty limited. And, frankly, mere best practices in the United States, well, some of the best practices. And so you can terminate actually for physical or mental unfitness, professional unfitness, disciplinary misconduct, or police conduct, custody or house arrest for more than 30 days. So I'll briefly touch on these. The physical or mental unfitness, I guess I would need to know a little bit more. I tried to dig into the labor law, law number 53, 2003, which is the labor code there in Romania, because in the United States, you absolutely cannot terminate for mental unfitness alone. The question is whether or not they'll be able to do their job appropriately under the guidance of the Americans with Disabilities Act and reasonable accommodations. Furthermore, the employee under police custody kind of cracks me up. I've seen employers in the past that don't actually terminate at all for the concept of going to jail in and of itself. The concept that generally people are terminated as a result of missing work as a result of going to jail. And that's just my own personal experience, but that is something that often happens. What I think is most interesting is while there are some serious controls with respect to how you can terminate and when you can terminate, what I think is quite interesting is you can't actually pay in lieu of notice unless it's a disciplinary dismissal. And so if you're getting rid of someone, you have to give them 20 days and they can just sit there. You don't get the opportunity to pay them so that they can be out. And the problem there is, and why many, specifically IT companies, do not allow employees to sit and do not allow employees to sit after they've given notice and immediately take their notices. They pay them, but they don't want any issues with respect to the IT infrastructure and things of that nature. Here, you have to keep them on as long as it's not a disciplinary dismissal. And that can be really dangerous to companies who, have a disgruntled employee in their midst and, is ultimately kept on for a period of time. There is no severance pay in Romania other than termination by as a result of physical or mental unfitness. So ultimately, you do have to pay compensation if almost like a short-term disability for terminating an employee. And I find that to be pretty curious. I mean, most countries, I would say, except for the United States, require some sort of payment, at the end to go ahead and move an employee on, although I'm sure it's contract to contract. But here, it seems to be specifically surrounding whether or not they're physically or mentally unfit, which appears to me to be like a short-term disability type payment, a payment to get them through the hard time, so to speak. What I found to be a bit surprising with respect to Romania is that there isn't a prior approval from a governmental agency, which, for a dismissal, in many, especially former communist countries and even current communist countries, there's a requirement of notifying labor boards. I think there are two countries, maybe Venezuela and Colombia in South America, that require a notice to the labor board. And so I think that this is interesting a little bit. There is no requirement other than collective dismissals, which we'll get to in a little bit, but collective dismissals are quite a bit different. That is required in the United States under the Warren Act, which most people are familiar with at this point. I, there are protections from dismissal, and I'll compare them real briefly in the United States. But the protections are, during leaves, which are, any number of leaves that almost entirely fall under the FMLA, as well as for discriminatory reasons, the race, sex, language, political or union views, and religion, as well as exercising the rights to be informed on employment issues, a trial period, request to transition to a vacant position with more favorable conditions. So, real quickly, and maybe there's a little bit of a language barrier here, but in the United States, you're not actually protected from dismissal, collective dismissal during FMLA. You could, in theory, be laid off during FMLA. I think it's very risky for the company to do, but if they're eliminating a whole lot of employees and it makes reasonable sense and they can make an argument for it, someone could be laid off during FMLA. Most companies would be recommended to not do that. That puts you at a serious disadvantage, but it is something that exists. There are special rules surrounding mass terminations. Again, that's particularly in line with the WARN Act in the United States, but there is quite a bit to it. You have to get a corporate body of the employer, give notice to the employer's representatives or trade unions, as well as a territorial labor inspectorate, speak with the trade unions, and all of these. If you have a trade union, if you have a collective bargaining agreement in the United States, all of these things would likely fall under your collective bargaining agreement. So while unions are pretty small portions of the overall workforce in the United States, these would all, generally speaking, fall under the collective bargaining agreement if there was one. And then you would have to issue an individual dismissal decision. So collective dismissals are not terribly different in the United States. And then the last one that I wanted to kind of touch on, which is very common, specifically with respect to most of the world, is that there's not a law. You can't have a mandatory retirement age, but there's actually a different retirement age for men and women for the public pension system. So the standard retirement age for women is 61, and the standard retirement age for men is 65. That number for 61 is going up in the next 8 years. So that's it on Romania. I wanted to obviously cover this. Link down below if you'd like to read more about these things or take it a little bit slower and learn more about the Romanian labor law system. And let me know if you're Romanian, which, I know it's an off chance, but if you're Romanian and you're watching this, do these expectations actually meet reality? And that's what my most curious claim is. This is what I want to know the most about all of these videos is this actually meeting what people say happens? I think that in a lot of these countries, these are the laws, but whether or not they're enforced or anything else is a completely different story. Let me know in the comments down below. Like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next video. Bye, guys.